everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be working on a landscape painting using acrylic paints. It's a really chilled out video, so let's get straight into it. If you are new to my channel, my name is Gemma. I create weekly art content. Make sure you subscribe if that sounds like something you'd be interested in. I'm starting out my landscape by just sketching out the rough lines using a yellow pencil. A yellow pencil is really good for this because it doesn't show through like a graphite pencil would. I'm working on a landscape from Australia. Now, if you know me, you'll know that I spent 2 years living in Australia and I take a lot of inspiration from Australia, and it's one of the places that I love visiting so much. So I've decided to escape a little bit and paint a scene from Australia. So I'm working on just a landscape scene with a shed in it. I really love the rustic countryside of Australia, and there's so much agricultural landscape out there that I just absolutely love. So I've decided to paint a shed within a landscape. I've just put down a really basic layer for my sky, so a very light blue sky, so that fades from a dark blue at the top down to a light blue at the bottom. And then I have just roughly placed in the tops of my trees with a really light green for now. It's really important when you're wanting to work on a landscape that you use a variety of tone with your paints. This is to give your painting depth and to make it look more realistic. So for now I just have a really basic light green. I'm then going to start working on the shed. And I'm not going to focus on too much detail with the shed. I just want to get some basic colours in here and a few basic details. But I want to give the impression that some of the corrugated iron is rusting, so I'm going to be working on a few textures within this in a moment. Another thing that's really important when you're working on a landscape is to think about the foreground. So I'm going to incorporate a few elements within this piece to show the foreground to make it look more realistic. I'm now adding more depth to my trees by adding a further green to the area where the trunks of the trees are, just to make it look as though those trees go further and further back and it's not just one little row of trees. I can then start working on some of the shadow work on the shed, and then I'm going to be working on some of those textures for the corrugated iron. And for that I'm going to be using a hog hair brush for this, and the bristles are quite hard, and I'm just dragging that down to show some individual lines on where there might be those wavy sections within the corrugated iron. I've used a rusty burnt sienna colour for a couple of areas on this to show where it's gone a little bit rusty on the corrugated iron, and I think overall this looks quite good for now. I might refine it a little bit, I'm not entirely sure just yet. And now I'm going to start working on the trees a little bit further to give them a little bit more depth, and I'm going to do this by adding different shades and tones of green. I'm just adding the tree closest in the foreground at the moment, and then I'm going to start adding some darker tones to the trees in the background. And at the very top of the trees I'm going to leave some of the really light tones to show some of the trees that are further away in the distance, and on top of those I'm just going to add some other tones of green. And then I'm going to add in my rusty coloured dirt road, because some of the landscapes that I saw out in Australia, there were a lot of these dusty red roads, and it's just such a iconic colour for an Australian landscape. This landscape that I'm currently painting is based upon a photograph that I have got of a shed at one of the farms that we visited. It's not 100% copy of the photograph that I have used that as an element of it. So I've taken the shed from my photograph and I'm just working that within an imagined landscape. So my landscape isn't 100% perfect. It is something that I really would like to get better at, and I think the idea of painting places that I really like to be right now is a good way to make sure I do practice my landscape painting. So let me know in the comments a way you would paint if you could paint anywhere at the moment to escape away to, because obviously we can't really travel at the moment, and you never know, I might give those landscapes a go, so let me know which ones you would like to see in a painting. I'm now just adding in little tufts of green within my landscape painting to show where the grass is, and again, just like the trees, I'm going to be using a variety of tones to show where the grass is, and the grass closest to the foreground is going to be a lot larger and it's going to be more prominent than the grass that's further away towards the shed. I decided to paint this tree in the foreground on this right hand side here, although I do kind of regret it ever so slightly. However, I just work on the leaves in the same way as I would with the background painting, so adding in the lightest shades and then the darker shades, and then just giving it some depth and tone with my different tonal values of my greens. And then I'm just going to define the dirt road further just by darkening up, because I didn't want to be able to see my brush strokes through my painting, and I think this just gives it a little bit more depth further. Then I add in some more green grass towards the front of my painting, just to finish it off. And then I can remove the tape, which I love removing the tape, it's so therapeutic. So there you guys have it. That was my landscape acrylic painting. I'm not much of a landscape painter, however, it's something that I would like to get better at, and obviously the best way to do this is by practicing, and I did really have fun just chilling out and spending an hour and a half painting a landscape. I know it made me feel a little bit better. We are currently in a pandemic and thinking about somewhere else that I would rather be, and just imagining a different landscape is a really good way for me to escape. If you have enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what landscape you would paint to escape away a little bit, and finally make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.